When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk? If you've had that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
Hello, and welcome to this special episode of Disturbed. These stories were voted on by our Patreon and selected as the best reads from last month's episodes. If you want to weigh in for next month's best of, join the Patreon at the link in the description. Without further ado, let's get to our first story. Our first story is narrated by the talented Gregory James from r/True Scary Stories. If they say, "I'm not going to hurt you," you should probably take that as a warning.
A few years ago, my husband and I were getting gas late one night at a bit of a weird gas station. Two roads intersected at an angle, with the gas station being on the acute angle, if you can picture that. There were no working lights at the pump we chose, and it was difficult to see from either road. We were in a soft-top Jeep Wrangler with all the rear windows taken off. My husband got out to pump while I sat in the passenger seat looking at my phone. That's when I heard it. "I'm not going to hurt you," a wavery voice said some distance behind me. I froze, suddenly terrified. I turned around to look out the empty space where our back windows used to be and saw what appeared to be a homeless man a little ways off. He had rather wild gray hair, a washed-out beanie, and an oversized jacket. His hands were in his pockets. I suddenly realized how dark it was and how hard it was for anyone to see us, and I couldn't see his hands. I had a distinct feeling deep down, so prominent I could almost hear it. Run! But we were just pumping gas. He was just a weird homeless dude. My husband and I were from Key West. We'd seen plenty of them before, and they were almost all harmless. So I slowly turned back around and went back to my phone. Yet I still heard him. The distinct sound of shuffling feet, the rustle of his jacket. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. "I just need some help. Do you have any money? I'm not going to hurt you." At this point, I could tell he was almost at the Jeep. We'd only been there a couple of minutes, and we'd been on almost empty. There was no way the tank was full. Without warning, my husband rushed into the car and hurried to start the engine. I could tell his hands were shaking. He managed to throw the car into drive, and we peeled out of there. I looked behind us and saw the man standing there, watching us with a blank expression, next to the dangling nozzle my husband hadn't bothered to hang back up. As we turned out of the gas station, my husband said, "I just had the most horrible feeling. Something in me just told me to run. I looked at him in horror and told him I'd felt the same thing. I felt tears come to my eyes as I thanked him for listening to his instincts. We went home feeling quite shaken and kept going over the events we'd just seen and the fear we'd felt. It was a day or two later that we were watching a YouTube video by security analyst Scott Stewart on the Kenyan Mall shooting. He said that in every event like this, there are people who said, right before it happened, I had this terrible feeling that something bad was about to happen. He adds that some people listen to that feeling and leave the area, while others mention how they regret not listening to it. I burst into tears hearing this, knowing the feeling he had described all too well. I had had that feeling and was one of those who ignored it. I remember crying, "Thank you," at my husband for listening to his sense of danger. Now, it's fully possible this was just a harmless person asking for money in a slightly creepy way and that nothing bad would have happened. But I can't stop thinking about how the weird angles of the roads kept anyone from seeing us. I can't stop thinking about how dark it was. And I can't stop thinking about his hidden hands. I still get full-body chills when his words echo in my mind. "I'm not going to hurt you." Moral of the story is, if you ever get that distinct feeling that something bad is imminent, leave the area. It may be a false alarm, but it's better than going through the rest of your life wishing you had listened to that feeling.
Our next story is narrated by Kat Carter from r/True Scary Stories. Never hunt alone.
This happened back in the fall of 2016. I live in a very small rural community where everyone knows everyone. The state that I live in allows rifle mule deer buck hunting during the first week of October. Sustenance hunting is very important in the culture of my area. That particular fall, I was lucky enough to have drawn a buck tag. I'd made plans to hunt on my grandmother's farm one evening, and given that I'm a smaller woman, I'd asked my husband to go with me in case I killed something so he could help me pack it out. Unfortunately, he could not go that night due to work obligations. Fine, no problem. I'd hunted on this farm many times by myself, and I knew it like the back of my hand. I strapped on my boots, grabbed my rifle and binoculars, tucked my cell phone into my pocket, and made my way to my Jeep. My grandmother's farm consists of corn bordering an alfalfa field along a river. Between the river and the farm are lines of old growth trees. This is the perfect place to fill a buck tag. I parked my Jeep about a mile upriver from the fields, then began walking along the tree line toward the area where most of the deer had been feeding. At the opposite end of the field, there was a large haystack where all the harvested alfalfa was stored. As I saw it coming into my field of vision, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I knelt down and viewed the area through my binoculars. I could see a very tall, large man come out from behind the haystack and start walking briskly towards me. I knew for a fact that I was supposed to be the only one hunting this farm on this night, as I had just spoken to my grandmother. Something inside me told me I needed to get out of the area as quickly as I could. I initially tried to turn around and walk back down the trees to my Jeep, but given that I have such short legs, this guy was quickly closing the gap. He was still several hundred yards from me, so I decided to try to cross the river instead, but I found that the river was too muddy and too deep for me to safely cross. I thought my only option was to attempt to get a signal on my cell phone. When the man walked across a small ditch, and disappeared from my line of sight. I quickly darted into the corn and kept quiet. I could hear him walking closer and closer. I desperately tried to call my husband. Back then, the closest cell towers were over 30 miles away, and cell service was extremely spotty. I could not connect to my husband or 911. By this point, the man was within 100 yards of me. I could hear him ripping corn out, stomping around, and loudly cussing. "Where the fuck did you go?" he yelled. It was getting dark quickly, and I definitely did not want to be in the dark alone with this man. I watched him for a few minutes and was able to determine that he did not have a gun. After weighing my options, I decided to step out and see if I could de-escalate the situation, as I work in healthcare and work with mentally unstable people all the time. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the corn. "Hi, I'm sorry if I interrupted your hunt. I didn't mean to cause you any harm," I said with a sweet smile on my face. I made sure there were at least 80 yards between us. His eyes locked with mine, and it was obvious there was something wrong with this man. He stood about 6'5" tall. His clothes were absolutely filthy, stained with what appeared to be his own waste and sweat. His shirt was torn and had dried blood on it. His face was crooked as if he had had a stroke prior, and he slurred his words. "There you fucking are," he yelled. He reached down and grabbed a massive stick. I'm talking a stick at least 5 feet long. He could have easily killed me with it. I stood my ground, grabbed my rifle from my back, and pointed it at him. He dropped the stick. We looked at each other for a second, then he began yelling, "Do you know whose farm you're on?" I said, "Yes, this is my grandmother's farm. I've hunted on it my whole life." The veins began to pop out of his head. "No, this is not. My wife is hunting in this cornfield and you ruined it. Because of you, she missed a huge buck, you stupid bitch." He became so enraged and started making strange growling sounds and started spitting everywhere. I was running through the options in my head at this point when he suddenly started to lunge at me. I turned the safety off my rifle and shouted, "Stop! I will shoot if I have to." He froze in his tracks and just stared at me for about 30 seconds before dropping the stick. He grunted loudly, with his eyes darting around. "Listen, I don't want to have to do something we will both regret. I'm very sorry I ruined your hunt. If you turn around and walk away from me, I will leave," I said calmly. I could see him thinking hard about what to do next until he finally mumbled, "Fine," and turned around, stomping back towards the haystack. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. I was not about to turn my back on this man, though. I watched until he walked a safe distance away, and then I darted back into the corn. I thought back on how he said I spooked a massive buck and ruined his wife's hunt. It doesn't make any sense. I had a good view of the whole field, and there were no deer present. I took out my binoculars to observe him. I watched him tramp over to the haystack and then get into a small 2-door white car nearby. He quickly peeled out of the haystack lot. I was able to catch that the car had California license plates, but I couldn't make out the license plate number. I live nowhere near California. He took off down the road alone. No one else was in that vehicle. I ran back to my Jeep and locked myself in. I sped home as fast as I could and told my husband what happened. I had never seen this man in my life, and neither had my husband, based on the description. We live in a community of about 200 people. Born and raised here, we know everyone. I called our local sheriff, who came out and took a statement. I took the sheriff to the haystack where the man had been parked, and we found a knife lying on the ground. Of course, nothing could be done as I was not able to get a plate, number, or a name from the man. To this day, I still have no idea what the man's intentions were, but I can guess a few. It's been 8 years, and I've never seen this man again. From then on, I decided I'd always be hunting with a buddy.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. Our final story is narrated by Kat Carter from r/Let's Not Meet. If you hear something, say something.
In 2013, I moved to Providence, Rhode Island for my new job. It was just me and my 4-year-old daughter living in a quaint and spacious townhome. Since we were relatively new to the area, we didn't know many people, but did become familiar with the kind older gentleman who lived next door in the townhouse that connected to ours. His name was Ben. Our street was lined with beautiful floral trees and it was quite nice, but Providence is weird in that the conditions of the houses and little neighborhoods can vary drastically, street by street. We were near a few rough neighborhoods, but I felt relatively safe in my new home. I remember one night I saw a Facebook post with a safety tip to put your car keys next to your bedside so if anything happens, you can press your car alarm button and scare an intruder off. I've never been overly concerned about my safety and rarely took advantage of any tips I saw on Facebook, so I'm not sure why I suddenly decided to heed this advice, but I started keeping my car key fob on my bedside table. A few nights later, I was reading a book in bed with my light on in my second floor bedroom, hours after putting my daughter to sleep, when I heard a loud sound outside. I peered out the window to take a look and saw nothing. I got back in bed, turned off the lights, and went to sleep. It was maybe half an hour later when I suddenly woke up to what almost felt like an earthquake. The room shook, and I heard a loud thud. Half awake, I gasped and sat up, wondering, if it was my imagination or if I had actually felt something. Immediately, I ran to my daughter's room thinking she'd fallen off her bed or injured herself. As I swung her door wide open, there she was, sleeping soundly and sweetly. I was so confused. I heard another loud bang and had an eerie feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. I grabbed my car key fob, took it downstairs as I nervously inspected the first floor. I swore to myself that if I heard one more sound, I would press the alarm, just in case. But I didn't. It was silent after that. I returned to bed, and although it took a while for me to fall back to sleep, I eventually drifted off. The next day went on like any other day until I noticed a friend of mine had repeatedly called me in the afternoon. After I picked up my daughter from preschool, called my friend back. "Did you hear?" he said. "No. What?" I answered. "News outlets were mobbing your street about an hour ago, and the news trucks were even in your driveway." I sat silent, confused. 3 men broke into your neighbor's place last night, tied him up at gunpoint, stole thousands of dollars worth of items, and took off with his car. I immediately fell to my knees and began sobbing. I had heard it all happen. I almost pressed the button. I almost did, but I didn't. I sobbed, feeling completely unsafe. I asked a friend to come stay with us for the night, and it wasn't until the next day that I got the chance to speak to Ben. Ben explained the whole story and told me the cops wanted to talk to me so I could share what I heard. He said the men smashed the window in his basement and entered through there, which is what I heard before going to bed. The timeline suggested that they saw my light and me peering out the window and waited 30 minutes or so they could enter the premises. They didn't realize Ben was home, and it was suggested that they cased his place beforehand. He'd been asleep when one of them started rummaging through his stuff upstairs in his bedroom, which was directly on the other side of my closet through a shared wall. The sounds and the shakes I heard and felt were apparently the intruder knocking Ben down to the ground after realizing he was there. The intruder cupped a hand over his mouth and told him if he made another sound, he would kill him. This is why I heard nothing more. After they tied him up and left, Ben remained tied up for over 12 hours. Till he eventually broke free and called the police. I cried again and apologized profusely to Ben, explaining what I had heard. He simply said that as he was tied up, he kept thinking that he was glad it didn't happen to me and my little girl. I really don't know what I would have done if my daughter and I had to experience that level of trauma firsthand. Ben seemed to be okay, considering it all, but it took me so long to feel safe again, and for my guilt to subside. They never caught the intruders, and I ended up ordering a taser, which was illegal, and some mace. For the first time in my life, I even considered getting a gun, but I decided against it. Fortunately, I've never experienced anything close to that again. I'm glad Ben was ultimately okay, but if something like this ever happens again, I'll listen to my instinct. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Elizabeth Flood. Our sound designer and audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Noah Fouts. Until next time, stay safe out there.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.